this is Lindsay. You are watching Lindsay Adventure, and today we are adventuring through another Bible story just like we do every single Friday. Now today, before we get into the story or stories we're going to be looking at, I would just like to tell you a little bit about my week and what's been going on, and that will kind of segue us into our stories. So for the past little while, in general, for ages / very recently, God's been starting to talk to me a lot about rest, and just kind of slowing down and giving him my burdens and all that kind of stuff. And so recently I was given Matthew 11 verse 28 to read, and we'll read that later. If you know it off by heart, that's wonderful. If you don't yet, please do so. But yeah, so recently life's been getting pretty hectic. I got a second job recently about a month ago, and so with that and things happening with my first job, plus just other stuff in my life, it was all kind of just building on top of each other, and one thing leading to the next, and there's now more to do, and this thing that somebody wants me to start. And honestly, this week I actually had to say no to something pretty big, and I know some people aren't going to be pleased with that, but that's okay. My job in life is not to make people happy, it's to glorify God, and I can't do that if I got too much stuff on my plate, to be honest. So yeah, actually a few days ago as well, here in Melbourne, in Victoria, Australia, we started hearing a rumour that we might have to go into lockdown, and today that rumour came true, and today we're starting the first day of our 7-day lockdown. Fingers crossed that it's only going to be 7 days and we can go back to normal after that. Yeah, so when I heard the news that this was going to happen, I honestly thought they were going to announce that it was going to be longer. 7 days is fine for me, I think. But when I heard that they were going to give us a lockdown, a very, very strict lockdown, I actually wasn't too worried like I was the last couple of times that it happened here. The last few times I, didn't have anyone around me that was supportive, and it was a really hard kind of time. Now I live with good friends, and it's a lot better all around. But also just on the stress and work side of things, I was like, you know what? If I have to work from home for the next week, it will not be the worst thing in the world. It means that for me personally, the stress will probably get less. It'll be a bit tricky getting things happening, but overall, I'm happy to stay home for the next week. So pleased. So yeah, also a couple of days ago, one of my very, very good friends reminded me of a poem that she gave me, and told me that I should probably look at it a little bit more often. And so I've been looking at it and just really internalizing it and stuff, and I'd love to share it with you, and I will share her Instagram link in the comments below, or in the description box below, sorry, so you can go and check it out. So I will read that to you now. So this is just one stanza of the poem that I was just reading through this morning, and honestly, it's exactly what I needed today. So this is a poem that's written as if Jesus is speaking directly to you. It says, "Rest with me, my dear. Lay your head down, close to my chest, for upon I will rest a beautifully jeweled crown." And that's all I'll read to you today. There's much, much more. But yeah, I hope that you go and check out her Instagram and go and check out all the beautiful poetry that she has there. And yeah, so just reading that today, along with everything that's going on in life in general at the moment, really brought me to this point of, yeah, today we're going to be talking about rest. And today we're going to be looking at a couple of stories of when Jesus rested. If my life is hectic and Jesus' life was also hectic and he rested, then there's no reason why I shouldn't take a rest in the middle of my hectic life. So let's look at, first of all, Mark chapter 4, verses 35 to 41. We'll just read through that quickly. It's over here. So this is after Jesus has finished telling a whole bunch of parables, and then it says in chapter 4, verse 35, "On the same day, When evening had come, he said to them, "Let us cross over to the other side." Now when they had left the multitude, they took him along in the boat as he was, and other little boats were also with him. And a great windstorm arose, and the waves beat into the boat so that it was already filling. But he was in the stern, so at the back of the boat, asleep on a pillow. And they awoke him and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" Then he arose and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And we're going to leave it there for now. So I actually love how Jesus is, he's finished a hard, long day of preaching and telling parables, and he's, just been hanging out with heaps and heaps of people who are following him around. And there's like a lot of emotional energy that is like drained from you in those kind of situations. And so they get in the boat, they're like out in the middle of the water. And they're like, finally, we can have some peace and quiet. And Jesus is like knackered. He needs to go in the back of the boat, found a nice comfy cushion to sleep on, and everyone else is rowing or tending the sails or whatever it is that they're doing. And so he's having a sleep. But of course, when you want to have a good nap, there's always something that goes wrong. And so this wind storm just blows up and is basically attacking them, trying to sink the boat and make them all drown. And so Jesus is having a good nap, and the disciples are freaking out, going, "Oh no, we're going to die." Like Peter is a fisherman. Like a couple of these guys are fishermen. They know how to deal with storms, right? And yet this one is really, really, really freaking them out. They're like, "Jesus, we're gonna die. Don't you care that we're dying? Why are you having a sleep?" And Jesus kind of like wakes up groggily. He's like, "Yo, wind, storm, peace, be still." And then he just like lies back down to keep his nap. That's the way I would imagine it anyway. And so he needs his rest, guys. So then what happens is they go heal the demon-possessed man, heal the girl and the woman like we talked about in the last story. Go over to Nazareth, all these different things happen. And then we hear in chapter 6 that John the Baptist is beheaded. And we know that John the Baptist is Jesus's cousin. And if you guys are following the Chosen series, just this week they released season 2, episode 5. And there was this really beautiful, sad kind of moment where like Jesus and John the Baptist are hanging out, they're chatting, and then towards the end of the episode, John's like, "All right, I'm going to go off to rebuke Herod for, marrying his brother's wife." And Jesus is like, "Oh, that doesn't sound like a great idea. Maybe don't do that." And John's like, "Nah, I'm going to go do it." And so John's just like, "I'm going to go." And he starts wandering off. He's like, "See ya later." And Jesus just kind of stands there and has like a really sad moment because he knows that this is the last time that he's going to be seeing his cousin alive on this planet. So yeah, there was this beautiful moment where Jesus is like just showing his human emotion, even his God emotion, I guess, that, this person is going to go and die because he's going to go and rebuke a king for, breaking the law. Fair enough. But yeah, it's this like last moment he's going to see his cousin. And so here in chapter 6, we hear, and Jesus hears in verse 30, that John the Baptist is gone off on his mission and he has been beheaded. And so understandably, this would cause Jesus to need to just take a moment and go off by himself to grieve, because whenever we have loss in our lives of any description, we need to actually take the time to grieve. And Jesus is wise enough to know that. And so he says, what does he say? In verse 31, he said to his disciples, "Come aside by yourselves to a deserted place and rest a while." And so he's telling his disciples to, all right, let's leave all these multitudes again. They keep following him around everywhere. Let's go off into the middle of nowhere where nobody can hopefully find us. And let's just take a moment to just process. Because John the Baptist isn't just Jesus's cousin. It's like the guy who was pointing everyone to Jesus. The guy who baptized probably half of these disciples before they even met Jesus. And so the guy who even baptized Jesus himself, like that, he's just got this huge following, this huge reputation, and he's like very personally attached and close to these disciples and to Jesus. And so they need to take their time. And yet, of course, what happens? The multitudes, they suss him out, sniff him out, and they find out where he's gone, and so they follow him, and Jesus has compassion on them and goes out to keep healing and keep preaching and, you know, just keep ministering to these poor people who just don't have anyone to lead them, and they just really need him. And so even though he was planning to take this time by himself to rest, he actually goes out there, he helps the people, and then he's like, okay, send them away, guys. Also, disciples, head out into the boat to the other side. I'll meet you later. And he goes off to pray by himself on the mountain. And so we see these occasions where Jesus is just like so just overwhelmed by the pressures of his ministry, really. And pressures of life, you know, the things that just happen that we have to process, like the death of his very close mate, his cousin. Yeah, so he's just got all this stuff that he needs to process and just, you know, needs to rest. You can't go very long without rest. So, yeah. So, in Matthew 11, verse 28, let's go there. This is the verse that I have been looking at a lot for the last little while. It says, Jesus is saying, "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." So whenever we have just heaps and heaps of stuff on our shoulders, just in our lives, whether we're working really hard, like you who labor and are heavy laden, come to me and I will give you rest. And I think in verse 29, it also says, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." Verse 30 says, "My yoke is easy and my burden is light." So when we have heavy burdens, I was praying this prayer this morning, like, God, like, Jesus, I have really heavy burdens in my life. I'll trade you. Please give me your rest that you promised to give me. And so he takes our heaviness and he gives us his lightness. And yeah, it's this nice trade-off. So that's all I really wanted to tell you today. Take a rest. Jesus rested. He needed it, and we totally do too. Love you guys. I will see you guys next week. Bye.